Hi, everybody. Hi, Scott. Today we're talking with Scott Mossman, and Scott is a Chicago artist and a very familiar artist with the Harper community. His work was included twice in the Harper National Juried Exhibition, Small Works, once in 2017 and once in 2019. In 2017, Scott's work was selected for the Purchase Award, so one of his pieces was acquired for the Harper Permanent Collection and is on display on campus here permanently. And then in 2019, after the Small Works exhibition, Scott was awarded the Exhibition Award. So, and now here we are today in Scott's solo exhibition here in the gallery. So welcome, Scott. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good.
First, I'd like to thank Jason, Sandy, and the rest of the art staff for making this all possible.
Oh, absolutely. We're glad to do it. Glad to have you here.
It's been a great experience.
Good. So can you just tell us a little bit about your background?
Oh, I was born in Omaha, Nebraska in 1957, and from that time to high school, I was mostly, my interests were mostly writing and music. I played violin. And at the tail end of high school, I took some art history classes, so I became interested in art. And then hearing about the great faculty at the University of Illinois from the curator of the American art at the museum in Omaha, I decided to go to school at U of I and study with Martin Prayer. So that's about it. And then went to graduate school and graduated in '85 and just been trying to stay active between now and then.
So you've been a busy artist since.
Yeah.
Right? So many years in the Chicago art scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I did a lot of graphic arts to pay the bills.
Oh, right, of course. So this exhibition, the title of the exhibition is Triple Threat: Painting, Sculpture, and Works on Paper, right? The three areas of your work. So can you talk a little bit about those three separate bodies of work?
For me, they've always kind of coexisted, but to preface, this is the first time, this is the landmark, first time all three mediums have ever been shown together, especially painting and sculpture. I've had shows where I had painting and prints, but never painting, sculpture, and painting, sculpture, and works on paper together. Oh. So this is the first time.
Well, we're honored.
Yes, yeah, and it's a great experience. It just seems like people like to pigeonhole you, and what are people gonna think, blah blah, whatever. But I think it worked out great. It's been a great learning experience for me.
So how do these three bodies of work relate within your overall work? Like what?
For me, especially seeing them all together, I don't see anything that doesn't relate with each other. Like on the way here, I was thinking, maybe it wasn't, I was lying in bed this morning, waiting for the alarm clock to go off, looking at the paint. I mentioned graphic arts and a lot of what I've done has been design, like page design. And this was also something that was one of my favorite artists, Pat Steer. When she was in her early days, she worked for a book publisher, and I think she designed pages, and her work kind of reflects that, and so I think so does mine, especially the way how things are composed here, kind of like you would do a book spread. Like I used to do a lot of textbook design, foreign language guides, things like that. So everything was about arranging things on a page, so that's pretty much where that comes from. And then this exercise was kind of the same thing too. I had some great help from Jason and my husband Raul there, but it's pretty much just deciding what goes here and, because like when I start a painting, I'll have the canvas laid out and I'll have like waterfalls, still life, objects, and I'll just sit and place it quickly, compose a composition, not thinking about it too much. Like it's like, oh, well, here's this relates, just do it, and it keeps it fresh.
Mm-hmm. So here, let's talk about the paintings here for a second. So the paintings, you're talking about the layout nature of the paintings, which is very different from the sculptures, right? I think, and I think a lot of people see them as very different because the sculptures are so singular, colorful. The paintings are colorful as well. But the paintings are so much more complex in their composition and their layers, their multiple images, multiple elements, and the sculptures are so singular.
Oh yeah. Well,
right?
For me, the paintings are about illusionistic space, creating a room within a canvas, and I try to work with depth, I play tricks with scale. For instance, having the ocean there really small and then having this artifact really large. And I try to do a little of that with these two, but that's mainly what I do here. So it's just trying to get the most out of a flat surface.
And does the same go for the watercolors?
Exactly, yeah.
So in the title, it's the third element is works on paper, right? Are your works on paper always watercolor? Or have they always been?
I think they have always been. The last time I did much works on paper, well, I did printmaking from about 1990 to 2000, and that was a mixture of this, and then I did some abstract pieces. But in 92, I had a show. It was also, I think quirkiness kind of is always a characteristic of the work. And it was at the Hyde Park Art Center, and I had a whole wall. I had made a lattice on the wall with strips of wood, and I just had all these diptychs with an abstract section and then a waterfall on one side. And they were all different colors of ink. Like I was trying to force myself to work with values more instead of depending on changing colors. So like one painting would be all sepia, another one would be like burnt sienna, so and so. And it was like you'd have something that looked sort of Clifford Stillish on one side, then the other side would be a waterfall. And then when you came in, you just saw this whole wall full of these ink drawings, just all at once. Your eye kind of moved around at all these waterfalls and then these abstract.
And when was that?
It was, I think, around 92.
Okay. So that's not hugely different from what we're seeing in this large group, large grid.
Exactly. It was called, I think it was called On Paper. It was put together by Lori Bartman down at the Hyde Park Art Center. Yeah. And then there was another person that had a big ink drawing on paper that started at the ceiling, came down the wall, and then went out onto the floor. So it was all work that kind of pushed the limits.
Right. A bit dramatic scale.
Exactly.
Shifts.
And then there was another person that she did ink on like 3 or 4 layers of glassine, so you'd see one through the other.
Oh, nice.
Cool. So it wasn't your just standard,
Right. Which is interesting because you kind of have translucency is one pretty noticeable difference between the watercolors and the oils. Not just because of their medium, but just in the way you've handled it. Too, right? There's an opaque solidness to your oils.
Yeah, definitely.
And a definite translucency to the watercolors, even though the compositions are similar.
Sure. Although here, I mean, I do try to keep them, like this one is, with that background with the stippling there is pretty
with this in here.
Yeah.
Right. So in these 3 bodies of work, the sculpture and the oil painting and the watercolor on paper, do you, this is work from the last couple of years?
Actually, it's all some of the sculptures are a little older, but the watercolors were started, I think, in January and went up to about June. And then these were all done about the same. They were started, I think, in January and ended actually, a couple weeks ago. There was one the last one, I think, was finished about 3 weeks ago. It's one that has some. So
then it's all work from within a year.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Keep it fresh.
So over the course of that year, did you simultaneously work in all 3 formats, or do you work in batches and kind of shift your studio from sculpture to painting to? How does it work?
I usually when I start sculpture, I starts out with some small pieces of paper and I sketch them out very quickly. I'll think, okay, I'm going to do some sculpture next week or so and so. So I'll sketch them out really quickly, blow them up on a Xerox machine so I get exactly the gesture that's on the sketch, and that becomes the template for the side. And then I'll just do nothing but make sculpture for like a month. And,
right. Okay, so they are
and
separated.
After a day of it, I don't want to do anything. It's just I'm all dusty. There's no doing this and oil painting at the same time. So
then do you complete work before you move back do you complete a batch of sculpture then and then be done, put it away, and move back to painting for a period of time?
Exactly.
There's no crossover?
Nope. No, usually not. Because this is always usually done in July, August, September. whenever I get a break for it. And then these were done actually simultaneously. I did the watercolors while these were drying, because I would work on them for a day. Like this is all maybe 5 layers of marks, and I let it dry before I go to the next shade. And so while I was waiting for these to dry, I would work on watercolors. Yeah.
Do you find when you move back and forth between the mediums that one is influenced by the previous? When you come back to painting after a month of sculpture,
oh, definitely.
Do you see something from the sculpture happening in the painting?
Yeah, color choices.
Color choices?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why I tend to, after a couple of years, I tend to change the colors sometimes, because like what seemed like a great color combination at the time is like, oh, I discovered, this shade of chartreuse or something. So, or else it just looked powdery, or, I improved on my technique, I guess.
Okay, so let's talk about influences a little bit. I think that your influences seem different in the different bodies of work. Maybe the painting and the watercolors together seem similar, but the sculpture then seems different. So I know you and Raul travel a lot, like to travel a lot, and you look at a lot of art and architecture, right? So those are obviously influences in the work?
Definitely. But definitely with these, because usually if there's an artifact in here, it's something that I shot on a trip. Like there's a lot of them here that surprisingly are from a museum in Hildesheim, Germany. It's just here in the middle of Germany. There's a museum of just pre-Columbian and Egyptian. So a lot of it was shot there. Some of it was shot in Battery Park a couple of years ago at the American Indian Museum. And then these came from some altarpieces, 15th century altarpieces we saw at the Belvedere Museum in Vienna. I think most of them did. They just happened to have a good batch of very stylized robes, where some places you'll walk in and there's nothing in there that I can do anything. I can't do anything with this. Like if they're too restrained or something, it's like, sorry, but it has to be from a certain period. And as far as the 3D stuff, a lot of it is like architecture. We went to Tibet several years ago, and a lot of the decorative ornament on the buildings, the red, yellow, and blue, you'll see layered. They take like jigsaw designs, little points, and it looks like it's all, but it's just several layers just glued together and painted beforehand, so you get all that variation of color. And other influences, other than art historical stuff. When I was under 10, we used to go down to Wichita for Thanksgiving, and there was a truck stop we'd always stop at, and just looked like a little diner. And while we were sitting there, there was this big heater that was way up in the corner. This menacing, it was just stuck up there in the corner of the ceiling. And then I think about 5 years ago, we saw one at the Grand Canyon. There was another one. It kind of took me back to the time. And then another thing that really was sort of a yaha moment, especially in regard to these, I used to collect clocks sort of voraciously about 30 years ago. We've got about 80 of them.
Wall clocks?
We walked into, we didn't see any because they were all in the closet.
Like cuckoo clocks and like wall clocks, or what do you like?
Mostly 19th century.
19th century.
Because I like them because they're very characteristic, the styles of the time period. And then they were, at the time, they were kind of like the most high-tech thing somebody would have in their house.
So this wall, if we go over here for 1 second, you can follow us. This feels like that, right?
Yeah.
It feels like a collection of
Well, it's like when you walk, I think what hit at me, we were up in the North Shore, and I forgot which train station we were in, and they had a clock in there, and they're always hung up very high. You walk in, it's the only thing in the room is that clock up there. This is the only thing people needed to look at when they came to the train station, to see when the train was leaving.
Right.
So it's sort of like the pulse of the room. And it would be hung, they usually hung about that high. So no matter where you were in the room, you could always see it up there.
Right, so these have that kind of almost functional sense.
Exactly.
And some of these objects, you talked about the heater. We have objects up in the corners, up near the top levels of the walls that feel like functional elements of the building or the room, right?
And then like if you go to Europe, it seems like lately they have these air conditioning, I think they're air conditioner / heating units. They're white and they have a grid on the front. They hang them over a door.
Yeah, those are real popular.
Yeah.
And these all kind of feel like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and then these two are kind of like a burglar alarm or something. They kind of radiate
right.
each other.
So it's interesting when the way you talk about the influences on the work, the sculpture seems to be influenced in retrospect. Like when you're making the sculptures, you're thinking about things you've seen, those objects in rooms, or the things that you saw as a kid, the heater or whatever. But with the paintings, it almost seems like you're going out doing research and collecting images.
Yeah, well, with these, it's like I do it quickly, and it comes to me later on after it's hung up. That this reminds me of this. Or there was one piece I have at home that one that kind of looks like a pirate's hat. My workroom at work was right across from the bathroom, and in the bathroom was one of those Dyson hand dryers. Mm-hmm. The piece is so close to one of those.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
It's dipped in the top where you put your hands, and then some of them look a little like paper towel dispensers, or.
And that comes to you after the fact as you're building it.
Yeah, I would say, I'm going to do a sculpture that looks like a Dyson.
But with the paintings, you're out in the world, mm-hmm. taking pictures of objects that you find interesting, and then pulling those together into. Yeah,
the culminate, the hunting out of them is like that, but then the actual arrangement and how they relate to each other beyond a formal standpoint. Like when I'm putting it in, it's all formal. It's like, well, I can't have a red thing here because there's a red thing in the corner, or I'm thinking about what the background is going to be, so I can't put a bunch of yellow objects on top of a yellow background. But then when it comes to what they quote mean after it's all together, that's mm-hmm. completely unknown. Like sometimes people have told me what they were like, oh, well, I can see the relationship between this, or.
So you find your design background coming out in the way you're building these
mm-hmm,
the paintings.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just a formal exercise, mm-hmm. just to make a nice, a good-looking painting. Mm-hmm. And then I think the more surreal characters come out afterwards.
Right, when you start to see the relationships between the objects you've put together.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's really interesting. So to kind of wrap up, what do you see happening in your work in the coming year or two? Is what's changing, or what have you seen happen in this year's of work that?
Well, these paintings are definitely going to be affected by the sort of rapid. I'm not going to say rapid because each one took probably 3-4 days, but these were done very quickly compared to how these are done. But I have a lot of compositions I want to try from these,
and continue them in watercolor.
Oh, do them in oil.
Oh, in oil.
Yeah.
So are the watercolors like studies for the oils?
Yeah.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because they're very, very, even quicker than these, and I'm able to finish them so much faster. And so the progression from one to any other was much faster than this would be.
So you feel you can work out compositions in
mm-hmm.
that medium faster before
right.
committing to the oil.
Yeah, and then it's not so precious. It's not this 30 by 40 canvas. I grab a skin glued the whole thing, and these are just a piece of paper that I pull off the tablet. Mm-hmm. So it's like a friend of mine said when she was stumped when she started grad school. Instead of getting out a nice piece of paper, she started just doing sketches on a little piece of brown craft paper, and she wasn't hampered by this has to be a good drawing because it's on a good piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any changes in the sculpture that you've seen happening?
I'll know when I sit down and start sketching. Yeah.
So it's in the last batch of work, you didn't see anything starting to feel like it what's next?
Yeah, they got more minimal with these two pieces, mm-hmm. but I don't know until and they can change while I'm working on
the spot. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Or sometimes it's while I'm making that, like I'll have the two templates and it's all deciding, well, how wide do I make the piece? How much space do I put in between the two templates that make up the side of it? And, and then the color, that's, for me, it's like 3/4 of the piece. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One person I thought of recently, I was wondering, you're talking about influences, John Chamberlain's just struck me as being a real, because I love his work.
Yes.
And except his are almost like ready-made, and
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that I can see that actually.
Yep.
That influence, especially in some of the more shapely ones, not the minimal ones per se.
Oh yeah, and then I was thinking on the way here, just the idea of hanging something on the wall hasn't been around for that long. I think it's been like the the last maybe 150 years.
Right.
Like you never saw
As an
sculpture
object.
hanging on a wall
Right.
and it's like a bas relief, but that was just like on the outside of a building or something. But there was so much in the 80s when I was first starting undergraduate school, you know, when of course you're sucking everything in, and there's so many people who did things that were just so drastically different from what you'd seen before, like Linda Banglis and Judy Pfaff with the stuff everywhere, and then Brian Hunt that I showed you with those. Just see the things with the long things like that.
Installation was influencing sculpture so much that the space was changing, right, and the orientation.
And then the whole, like, is it painting or is it sculpture? That was a whole big issue, and it's like, well, no, because it's a painting. But the lines between things were so blurred. And it was sort of like an anything goes.
Well, thanks, Scott. We're really excited to have your show here. It's been very well received in this first week, and we're excited to have it up for the next month or so, and thank you very much.
It's been a great opportunity. It's a wonderful, wonderful space, one of the nicest spaces I've ever shown in.
Well, great.
The nicest people I've ever worked with.
Well, thanks, Scott.
Sure.
Thank you.